Hey gang, welcome back to another video here at Joe Daddy's Garage. This video will be Brooklyn Pony Part 35. Brooklyn Pony Part 34 dealt with the installation of the Mustang's Defeater billet hood hinges. And again, I was very happy with those and very satisfied with how they function, and I think they're just fantastic hinges. But there are some other issues that I need to deal with that relate to the hood. And I mentioned that in that previous video. For those of you that have been watching all along, you already know the sequence on this car. And for those of you that have just started subscribing to the channel, I suggest you go back and check out all the videos in the Brooklyn Pony series. And also, I have videos on a 68 coupe that I built, another 65 coupe that I built, and I think, yeah, another 65 coupe called Mystique. So there's a variety of videos on here that relate to the Mustangs. But in this particular video, like I said, I want to point out some problems with this hood. And I also want to point out that if you see the box in the background there, it says Dynacorn on it. Okay? And I've mentioned it before in my videos that I have unboxed fenders or different pieces that has said Dynacorn on the panel. Now, on some of those panels, when I open them up or I show in the process that the box itself may have been some other manufacturer, and Dynacorn put a sticker on it claiming it as their own. Now with this hood, that box actually says Dynacorn. It's a printed box with their logos on it. So it's not one that they just put a sticker on. So that leads me to believe that this is built for them, but my instincts and my experience tells me that this is basically the same hood as any other manufacturer. And I'm going to point out why in just a minute. Now during the installation of the hood hinges, I did point out some things, but I'll go over some things again. The gap is pretty decent on this fender on the passenger side. Some of that's going to be hard to modify or tweak because you've got basically a 90-degree angle here. So your options of changing the shape of the fender are very limited without chopping stuff up and making it fit better. In the back, I have a nice consistent gap all the way across. And you have to maintain that gap, because if you don't, the center section of your hood right here is going to catch on the cowl and you'll end up chipping paint off. So you may think, well, I can make that tighter. In reality, you can't, because you have to have clearance for the hood to open. In the front, as I pointed out, and you can see where my hand is, the drop-off shape from the extension to the hood is off. Now, as I pointed out, I can't really do anything in the back beyond, I can make a huge gap back there, but that's going to look terrible, and it's only going to address some of this. So I see the same thing on both sides. And I don't know why the manufacturers are doing this. And it could be, again, it could be Dynacorn, it could be any of them. It's very prominent that I've seen so many pictures and videos of other Mustangs, unless they've been modified, but if they used the aftermarket hood, they tend to have the same kind of problem. And I mean, I've seen pictures all the time with that same issue. Another thing I want to point out is there's a bunch of raised portions on this hood. Now you could stand back here and go, wow, it looks fantastic. And for the most part it does. Well, if you come down, see if I can point this out right here. Catch it in the light. It's really hard to catch it just right. I don't know another way to do this. But there's a little raised spot right there. Right there. There's one right there, and it's on both sides, and I think it has to do with the assembly process and the glue or whatever they use to put this the inner structure together. Overall, it's probably not that big a deal. It's just something I want to point out. There is some variation along this edge, just a little bit of a low spot right there, and some of this you just have to deal with because that's the way it is. Now, another issue is how flat the hood is. So if you look down the length, and if I adjust this front section up just a little, you're going to have a little bit of a high spot. And I've played with this, and I'll show you some of the things I did to try to remedy that. Now, you could shim the fender and try to bring it up a little bit. Along that kind of run, you can change the shape just a little bit, because this fender is not, I mean, the hood's not actually flat. The fender has a more consistent flat shape. So I may experiment with that just a little bit, but I'm just pointing some things out. Same on this side. If I adjust up a little bit, you end up with a slightly raised section. Because you know, I'm looking at consistency, especially up front. And I may have to, again, try to shim the fender to address that a little bit in the back. Now here's one big thing that I want to point out. Again, these hinges are fantastic, opens up nice, but these two pieces of panel, the inner structure, which is the main structure for this hood, and then the outer skin, are technically not attached to each other. If you look at a factory hood, you'll see a bunch of little spot welds going down the edge. And they do that to keep the hood rigid and give it strength. And I'm going to set the camera up and show you why this is an issue and what I'm going to do to fix it. But I just want to point that out, and let me get the camera reset and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So essentially, the inner structure, the main framework of the hood, is just sitting in place, and that's what the hinges are attached to. The outer skin is just clamped on with the flanged rolled over edge. So if I lift this hood up, and I'm going to try to get a good angle here, and I just push down on one side and up on the other, you can even hear it. The outer skin is just sliding around on the inner structure. Here's a slightly different angle. I don't know why they do this. If this hood is built on a template or a pattern or whatever, a jig, why don't they spot weld these edges? We shouldn't have to sit here and worry about whether it's sitting straight or not, because this becomes an issue, especially in a trunk lid. I've pointed this out on trunk lids before. Whenever you're trying to position it, if you lift up a little bit more on one side than the other, it's going to open up that way. It's going to be out of shape whenever it gets up, and then you close it, you could have some tweak, and just very frustrating in my opinion. So what I'm going to do, see that? I'll show you what I'm going to do. So this is my plan, and I've done this before, again, on like trunk lids and other hoods. See the little silver marks? Those are at 8-inch increments. So what I did is I started down here at the corner, took a tape measure, stretched out at 8-inch marks, and I'm going to take a sanding disc and I'm going to bare the metal at this joint. So let me get a light up here. So basically what will happen is I will create an area that I can do a spot weld. And when I get the hood positioned exactly how I want it, how I think it's going to look correct, I will gently open the hood and start welding at each one of these little locations so that the hood becomes rigid. Now, I do want to point out there are some other things that could happen or that you could do to try to make this better. I've already done some adjustments on this hood to try to flatten it out a little bit and get the shape right. And part of that involves pressure and blocking. And what I mean by that is I've taken, in this case, I've taken a couple of standard thick paint sticks, put back here on this edge, and there's just enough space behind the bolt that I can put those. And by closing the hood that's supported now on that edge, and it maintains that shape. And then I've come up to the front here, and it'll still move without any, you know, inner structure support. And I've done different things where I've taken a small, like a 2x4, and set it under this corner so that it has something holding it, and then applied pressure along this edge in different different locations, trying to get it to flatten out as much as I can. But the difficulty is you're dealing with two panels, and you know, one has all these bent angles and stuff that create the inner structure of the framework for the hood. So your chances of manipulating it are very limited, but I've already done as much as I think I can. And oh look, there's the made in Taiwan sticker. Anyway, so I've done as much as I can on both sides to try to get that shape where I want it, and the rest I'll have to try to, you know, again, adjust with the fender, maybe shimming or something to try to compensate as best I can. So at this point, I'm going to get a sander and bare those locations, and then get ready to start welding. Alright, so that was just welding the spots on the sides. So I just want to show you there's still a little bit of play, but it's because I haven't done the front or the back edge. The reason I haven't is because the back edge obviously is going to be hard to do while it's on the car. So I'm going to repeat the steps that I did on the sides with the front edge, and then I'll show you again what it looks like. So what I did is I measured off about 3 inches from this corner, marked it from the center peak back about 3 inches, somewhere in that range, and then I split the difference. And so there's 3 on this side and 3 on this side that are welded. Now it takes some effort to make it move at all, and a lot of that is just inherent. You know, it's because it's such a large panel. You can change it a little bit, but it's not swishing around now inside, you know, the outer skin on the inner. So now it's solid, much better. Alright, so now I'm going to deal with the other fitment issue, and I have had some suggestions made, and some of those suggestions were modifying the shape of the headlight extension, but that's not going to work because it is a taper, and it gets fatter as it goes back. So if you try to grind that off, you end up with a really blunt edge, and then you have to try to reshape that. So it would take a lot of extra work, in my opinion, to modify the headlight extension. I'm going to modify this. I'm going to modify the hood. Now, you could say, well, maybe if I just took some metal wire, you know, some rod, I could weld that on and build it up until I duplicate that shape. And you could do that. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. But I want to show you another idea that I have that I think is going to work. So I'm going to take a piece of paper, and I'm going to put it on that corner. I'm going to start it on that corner right there, so you can get an idea, hopefully, what I'm showing you. And then I'm going to trace that, because that curve is pretty important. Alright, so there's the peak of the curve, and a stop point. It may not look like much, and I may not have gotten it exactly an exact shape. It's kind of hard to hold it with my hand, but the point being, I want to use what's here. My plan is I'm going to cut this corner. Well, actually, I may not even cut the corner, but what I imply or am intending is I'm going to cut loose part of this front edge because it is bent around the inner structure. So if I cut, let's say, this corner right here, and I come up a little bit, and then I cut a new line across, and I take this piece and move it out, it's going to match the transition of the extension. So if I pivot this, hopefully you can see that and it makes sense. It actually is going to flow the way it should. I'm going to maintain that curve that's already in there, move the curve, and then back build to this piece. And I think there's enough material on the bent flange that it'll allow for that. I can come out and then tack that back to the hood. So basically I'll be making a filler piece right here. That's the plan, and I'm pretty confident that that's going to work. I think that's going to work just fine. Now I know this looks complicated, maybe, I don't know, but what I plan to do is I'll knock down these edges a little bit, and I'm just going to make a filler piece that'll take care of that gap. And at the moment what I want to do is make this not move anymore. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit and get the welder and just kind of weld build, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of an inch or something like that, and that way it doesn't move around. And as you can see, I have a paint stick under here because I'm supporting the hood so that it matches as much as I can with the fender. So the curve here, and then as much as I can with the height. Well, basically what I'm doing is just taking some sheet metal from some old patch material that I had and just cutting off bits and pieces with a set of tin snips to get it a rough shape. And basically I'm gonna maybe use a sanding disc and continue to blend this down until I get it to fit that cutout that I made. So basically this is what I'm using here. I have this little piece that fits in nice, and I'm not worried about the edge right now. I want to get this section taken care of, and then I'll worry about the other side and that edge, because it's okay to, I'm going to have to cut off a little more material anyway, so that's not that important. Right now I just want to get the shape right and get the filler piece to fit correctly, and I think it fits pretty well. So of course I will put some self-etch primer in here. As you can see, this is the inner lip, or the inner panel. So there was no primer on that anyway. You know, it just doesn't work that way, that it gets into that area. So I'll put some on there, and I'll put some on the back side of the little filler piece, and then weld that all together. So before I go any further, I'll show you, this is what I used. It's 3M weld through primer, or weld through 2, part number 05917. I've had good luck with this, and that's what I pretty much always use now. So as you can see, I have that little filler piece in there, and all I'm going to do is try to hold it in place a little bit with a screwdriver so that it doesn't move on me when I start welding. Basically, I don't get in a hurry. I want it to dissipate the heat. You know, I don't want to have any warps or anything, so I'm going to just keep checking to make sure it's smooth where I want it to be smooth. And if I need to adjust a little bit. There we go. Now again, I'm just going to let this cool, keep, you know, bouncing around, doing little tacks, and finish it. So I did take a 2-inch sanding disc and blended down the welds a little bit just so I can see where there's any little gaps that I have to fill. And so I'm going to continue on with the, you know, just tack welding it in, and then I'll blend it again, and then I'll work on this edge over here to get the transition the way I want it. As you can see, I'm further along in the process, and I did, you know, finish welding in all of the little gaps and blend it again with a 2-inch sanding disc. Very happy with how this looks, and also where it's at in the point of transition with the fender extension. So I'm still going to work on this edge just a little bit and try to shape that, and that'll just entail cutting off probably a little bit of this material, because if I were to take a straight edge and lay it where the original line is, you can probably see there's a little bit of material sticking out, and it's hard for me to see the camera, but there's a little bit of material sticking out right there. So this is just a 6-inch rule, and you know, there's just a little tiny bit showing. So, you know, I'll take a cutoff wheel, a Ziz wheel, and trim that up, and then back weld this edge. And if there's any other little spots, I'll fill them and reblend them as well. thought I would show you how it looks after all the welding is done, the blending, and how the transition works. Now this paint stick is just kind of a reference, but I feel like that's really close to where it's going to be, and if it needs to be adjusted at all, I can adjust it. Also, let me point out that in moving this, it kind of changes the angle just a little bit, and you may end up taking a hammer and dolly and kind of dropping this tip down just a little bit, and really just a matter of putting a bar behind here and kind of tapping down on this corner just to change the shape. And I thought I would do a demonstration. As I mentioned at some point in the video, I think, that I used a hammer and dolly to reshape this edge just a little bit. I did that because when I extended this out, it did not want to drop down as much as it should have. So it was just a minor imperfection. I used a simple dolly and just put the curved edge, brought it towards the front, and then a body hammer. And basically just tapped that slightly and got it to curve just a little bit. It didn't take much, and that got the shape that I wanted. Now, of course, this will still get filler applied, even though it's very nice and very smooth. There's still going to be, scratches and different things that need to be addressed. So this will get some filler in here, and I don't know if I'll show that. I probably won't show that, but you've seen enough of my body work, I'm sure, that do that with filler and block sand that out and make sure it's smooth. But other than that, that should be it. And I did that just to get a little bit more of a curve out of that piece, but I think it turned out pretty nice. Now, I still need to do this to the other side, and one more thing that's going to happen, I'm going to weld shut all the holes for the traditional Ford lettering. In a conversation with the owner, we decided that it would look a lot cleaner without those letters and probably reduce the opportunity for rust to get in there. So I will. A little less aggressive sanding disc here. I don't know what the grit is, but it's pretty smooth. Got one little spot. So this will be the end of this particular video. I think I covered a lot of ground, but there's still more work to do. I still need to weld the back edge of the hood, which I need to do with it off of the car. I still need to do a little bit of welding on the front edge where I made the extension or pulled the piece away and put the filler piece in. So I have to do a little bit of welding there, and I still need to weld all the rest of the letters, where the holes shut, and of course I need to finish modifying the right front or the passenger side front edge of the hood. But I think you can see not everything's going to fit. It takes some extra work to make it look right, and it may not be for everybody, but I know my particular taste. I know what I want to see when it's all done, and as I said before, if somebody looks at it and they don't notice something, then I did my job right. It's when they do see those offsets or changes or something wrong, that means I didn't do it right, and I'm not happy with that, and so I'm not going to leave it that way. But for those of you that are new to the channel, I ask you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, anything you want to on the channel so it gets some traction and other people can see it. For those of you that have been long-term subscribers, I thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the process. And until next time, take care of yourselves. And I just want to show you to do the others. But I need to take the hood off and flip it over so that I can finish up the work on the where I welded it, because there's a little bit of there's still a little bit of work to do now. Where the little bit of the where I cut the hood